What's up, guys? NanMan here, and we've got another episode of Modern Meta Breakdown coming up. This time we're going to be talking about Dredge. You can see I've got cats hanging out in the background. So Dredge has been a deck that we've highlighted on this channel before. We've even seen matches with it for our coverage that we've done in the past, but there's been some new pieces that have come out, some new tools, so we're going to kind of bounce around and talk a little bit about what are the new pieces that exist, what kind of is the main strategy that the deck's trying to do, how you might be able to disrupt it and kind of mess with it, and just kind of overall what this deck is trying to accomplish by playing in the modern meta. So some of these cards do have some flexibility, and depending on how things are going in your meta and what you might need more of or less of and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is a list that's pretty consistent with what you're going to be seeing running around more or less. So let's take a moment and highlight at least a little bit. We're also going to be trying something new with the way that we're highlighting cards. So let's hop over and take a look, shall we? Okay, here's the list that we're going to be highlighting today. First things first, you can kind of get an idea of the breakdown of spells to creatures, artifacts, that sort of thing. I am also showing the sideboard options that are available, and we'll talk about those as well. But getting things started, let's talk about at least card draw. And if I can pull up our card draw here. There we go. All right. Card draw. That's what we want to talk about. So basically, oh, it's not in the right screen. There we go. Okay. Card draw exists. This is going to kind of be flashing around for the cards that kind of give us the ability to draw cards in this list. We basically have kind of two breakdowns in the main board. Well, three. We'll talk about three main sections of it. We've got card draw that exists right here that are the ones that I'm highlighting. Cathartic Reunion. We've also got our Merchant of the Veil, and then we've got our Ox. Ox is also a somewhat payout card, but we're kind of factoring him in this because of the ability that he's got to draw cards on him there. So these are the three draw cards. You've got enablers that exist in this deck, and then you have payout cards. Those are kind of our three sections that we're going to highlight. So first things first, most people should be familiar with Cathartic Reunion here. You know, additional cost with it besides the 2 mana is that you have to discard 2 cards, and then you get to draw 3 cards, which if you tie that in with your enablers, it works out amazing, because the enablers are those dredge cards. Going to kind of dump things into my graveyard. That's the objective of this deck, is try to get as many things into the graveyard as possible. So a lot of the card draw that we're talking about is highly connected to those enablers that we're going to highlight in a little bit there. But being able to draw 3 cards is really good, because you can say, well, I'll draw 1 card, then I'll dredge, right? Or I'm going to dredge for each one of them and just dump a bunch of stuff. So Cathartic Reunion, really powerful in that regard. Faithless Looting is no longer legal in Modern, so we need to find a new tool, and that kind of goes along with our Merchant here. So for 1 red, you can discard a card and draw a card. So immediately getting a Dredge enabler into your graveyard on turn 1 is awesome. All right. The other option, you can have him be a creature that costs 3 mana for a 2/3, discard a card, draw a card for 3 mana. Really, you're not ever going to be worrying so much about doing that, hard casting him as a creature. No, it's really just, I'm going to go on an adventure with him and start pumping things, getting ready to go. As for the Ox, you know, this is kind of one of the, again, newer cards that has popped up here. Costs 5 mana, enters the battlefield, you discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. But you can pay double red and exile 8 cards from your graveyard to cast him from your graveyard for his escape cost, and he gets +1/+1. So he's a 5/3 when he comes from your graveyard. So this is another card that you can be able to discard off your Merchant of the Veil. You can be able to discard it off your Cathartic Reunion and kind of help get things going. Or just it gets dredged from the top of your library into your graveyard, and then you're feeling great because, hey, you have a bunch of lands and other spells that you're not going to be able to cast from your graveyard. Things like Cathartic Reunion, things like our Merchant here that you can just be like, all right, I'm going to exile those. I have no problem with that. So I did want to highlight those sort of powerful draw spells that exist in this. And now let's talk about the enablers, right? The things that really push this deck to do what it's trying to do, which is that dredge mechanic. So you'll see them kind of scrolling across the screen. And let me know what you guys think about this kind of slideshow of cards instead of what we've done previously. Do you like that we're just going to keep rotating these on screen and kind of talking about them? Or did you like our old way of doing it and just pulling up one image at a time, or maybe have 4 images up at a time to kind of highlight? So let me know in the comments below which one version of this sort of video do you like the most. So there are a couple of cards that exist in this list that do have that dredge mechanic or help to get cards from the top of our library into our graveyard. The single artifact that exists is our Shrinkhorn here. So enters the battlefield, 3 counters on it, and you can remove a counter by tapping it to be able to mill the top 2 cards of your library. Well, target player, but you're targeting yourself in this regard. So it's just kind of turn 1, you're hoping to land one of these or hoping to land one of that merchant draw discard ability going on here. The other things is if you're able to get those powerful things like Life of the Loam, getting this in there, you get a Dredge 3, seems great. All right, Golgari Thug, being able to Dredge 4 is really what we're hoping for. Stinkweed Imp, Dredge 5, that's definitely what we're hoping for. And you can see kind of that breakdown for numbers here. There are more imps than there are thugs in the list because of that extra dredging in there, dredging 5. Yes, we definitely want to make sure that gets into our graveyard. And then you can see breakdown. If you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly 5 cards or whatever the dredge number. So for thug, it would be dredge 4, right? When we're talking about imp, it's dredge 5. So you may put 5 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard, then return this to your hand. So it's basically like, all right, I'm going to draw for turn, but actually I'm going to dredge 5, and now I have this in my hand, and I can use it to cast my Cathartic Reunion or cast my merchant here, and we'll just throw it back in the graveyard so we can dredge it again, right? And you can really just kind of snowball and get things going. So we're talking about these cards. We have to talk about the payout cards. What is the whole point of throwing our deck into our graveyard? So those are, of course, going to be on the right-hand side of the screen while we still have those other images scrolling over on the left as we kind of talk about. So there's 2 main creatures that are just payout of just, hey, if you've got stuff going on in your graveyard, we care about that. Like, for example, our Narcomoeba, which has reduced in numbers, and that's partly due to the change in the way that this list has kind of adapted and developed over time. So there used to be a lot more Narcomoebas running around. Now there's only 2 in this list. So when it gets put into the graveyard from your library, you just get to put it on the battlefield, which helps tie into our prized amalgam. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from the graveyard, guess what? You can return prized amalgam to the battlefield tapped. Seems pretty good. He also interacts well with our other kind of newer payout card, which is our Ghoul here. So this has been the kind of change and development of the Dredge list this year, right? M21 came out, and now there's this cool card. Normally costs 3 mana, but you're not so much caring about this. You're caring about getting it into your graveyard, right? So discarding it, dredging it, whatever way you can to get it in there. It's a 3/1, but you can pay 2 mana, sack it, and draw a card. Now, how does this care about or matter about the graveyard? If you gain 3 or more life this turn, you get to just return it from your graveyard. So that ties in with our prized amalgam. Hey, guess what? Our Ghoul came back, prized amalgam now comes back. So how are we going to be able to get that back by getting that 3 life? That leaves us into our 2 kind of payout spells. Creeping Chill, guess what? Deals 3 damage, you gain 3 life. Seems pretty great. Now, if it gets put into your graveyard from your library, off of that Dredge, off of that Shrinkhorn, however you've been able to get it in there, you just get to exile it and deal 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. Helix is a newer one that we're starting to see, of course, from our modern set that we had last year. It does have this flashback ability. Normally it costs 4, deals 3 damage, you gain 3 life. Again, that 3 life kind of working very well, synergizing with our Ghoul. So we need kind of that extra. So there's 5 kind of gain life cards to help us get Ghoul back from the graveyard. Seems great. Flashback, you can pay a red and a white instead of having to worry about that 4 mana, or keep it in your hand as you kind of develop into the game. Pay the 4 mana, boom, bring back the Ghoul, bring back your prized amalgam, and just sort of build up this wall of zombies that way. And then you have that flashback later on. So these are kind of our payout cards, and you also probably have seen up in the right hand corner us talking, or at least highlighting, Conflagrate. Now, there used to be a lot more of these in the list when we were having less of our ghouls, that sort of build up of where it is now. But this is a great payout card that cares about that kind of flashback, right? You can also cast it from your hand, but really the main thing is the flashback. Double red, discard X cards. When you're dredging, you have to return that creature or that card back. So if you have life from the loam and you dredge 3, get a bunch of lands back, right? You are just able to build this huge hand size of cards. And if you're not having those discards spells like Cathartic Reunion or things later on, you can be able to just dump a huge number of spells into this Conflagrate by discarding a bunch of stuff and just dome somebody with this. So it's like chip away, chip away, chip away with all these drain spells like Smelting, Smiting Helix, not Smelting, Smiting Helix, Creeping Chill, and your creatures chipping away at them, and then you just finish them off with a Conflagrate. So it's a nice way to just sort of finish people in this sort of regard. So let's kind of move these slideshows away for a second so we're not distracted while we talk about sideboards for a second. All right, so sideboard is kind of broken into creature removal, artifact hate and removal, and graveyard protection. Graveyard removal also, / how you want to look at it. So our first 2 cards we're going to highlight, Dark Blast and Lightning Axe. Both work very, very well with this list because Dark Blast does have that dredge mechanic. Also, there are some 1/1 creatures that exist in Modern, or 1 toughness creatures that exist in Modern that you care about killing. Lightning Axe is for all those bigger creatures that exist in Modern that you care about killing. But hey, you have all these dredge cards in your hand that you need to get back in the graveyard. Discarding them with Lightning Axe works so much better than having to pay all that extra mana. So that's why those 2 are existing in this list. Works really well. Thoughtseize is that disruption. Hey, just a little bit of extra protection, maybe playing against a combo deck, and just need that little bit extra to help slow them down for you to kind of run them over there. The rest of our section here, Ancient Grudge, Shenanigans, and Stony Silent and Wear and Tear, right? Those are all artifact hate. The Wear and Tear is important though because Tear, destroying an enchantment, can matter against ley lines, right? Leyline of the Void is basically forcing all graveyards to become exile piles, right? So having that in there to kind of stop somebody, also messing with other sort of things that they might run. Grafdigger's Cage, Relic of Progenitus. There are graveyard hate cards that exist, and that's why you need a lot more of these sort of artifact and enchantment destroying spells to allow you to basically play your game, because you can easily shut down a dredge deck if you're just lucky, right? Oh, I had a opening hand Leyline of the Void, and I happen to have my Relic of Progenitus or Grafdigger's Cage or things like that back up with it. So having multiple removals is important. Now this list is going to get hosed by Leyline of the Void because things like our Creeping Chill are not going to be hitting the graveyard. When you're playing against somebody that's running Grafdigger's Cage, Relic of Progenitus, you're okay. You can still go with this game plan of I'm going to drain you and then hit you with a big Conflagrate, or chip away at you with my Ox and my prized amalgams and my ghouls, and build up to this sort of, hey, finish you off kind of thing. So that's why we need to make sure that you have these Wear and Tears and other sort of spells to kind of shut down these enchantments like Leyline of the Void. So a lot of really cool stuff that exists in this. I like this version of this sort of drain payoff cards, more than the older version of the Dredge that we've seen before, which of course I'll put up links so you guys can see what older versions of Dredge look like. But that's how things are looking for the list. I mean, it is, again, you need to have those graveyard hate cards that we kept highlighting to help you shut this list down. Having wrath effects like Wrath of God or Supreme Verdict or something, if you're running a control list, is nice because you can kind of get rid of a lot of stuff, but you have to be careful because they can all come back, right? That's the power of Dredge, is that, oh, you've destroyed me, but I'm still here, right? Compared to another creature-based list like humans or elves or something like that, that if you get enough board wipes out there, it really messes with them. Used to be when people were running more Anger of the Gods and things like that, it became harder because it would start exiling our creatures, but there's a lot less of that running around, so the power of Dredge is kind of rising up again. So just wanted to highlight this in this episode here. If you like the new way of doing things with the kind of slideshows that we had over on the side here, as we talked about things, let us know in the description. There's also links to the deck itself if you wanted to kind of look up and see kind of more details about different versions of Dredge. Again, we're going to keep updating new episodes every month for you to be able to enjoy, and working on getting more coverage coming up. So keep an eye out, hit the subscribe button, the follows, all that kind of good stuff if you haven't yet, and stay tuned so you can see some links and other information about other content that we're producing. Hey everyone, NanMan here. I'm a StarCraft 2 and Magic the Gathering content maker and commentator. Thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check the description for more information about other content that I'm doing. I've also got a new podcast, NanMan's Nerd Corner, which you guys can find out on Spotify or iTunes. It's got a bunch of Magic content as well as other stuff. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.